Hello, I'm Ken Andrews, founder, music director, and conductor for the Orchestra of Northern New York. And thank you for joining us for this segment of Tuesday Talks with a Maestro. Today's special guest is Gail Schaberg. Gail is not only emeritus musician with the Orchestra of Northern New York as Principal Flute from 1988 through 30
years total, but not principal all that time.
And I'm going to come back to that question in a little bit. But she's also an emeritus faculty member from the Crane School of Music, where she was in the music education department, but her specialty was special ed. And I can't tell you how many students I tried to send to take classes with her because she was such an amazing, amazing teacher and player. I wanted to ask you, though, about your early years first. Did you first start on flute, or did you start on another instrument?
Actually, I started on piano. I had maybe 2 years of piano before I started flute in 4th grade. And it was both for quite a while, then finally just flute.
Yeah, that's the way mine sort of did. The piano finally
it faded out, although I still kept playing.
And where did you begin these studies? Was this in a public school education?
Yeah, it was public school. It was a band program, but even somewhere along the way, the band director was giving private lessons to the students. So I had school private lessons, and later, probably my sophomore year in high school.
And so you started piano in 2nd grade and flute around 4th grade. Where was the school that you began? Where was this you grew up?
This was a town about the size of Potsdam in Ohio, Dover, Ohio. And it had a wonderful music program, and had a reputation of a strong music program in the public schools.
I know Dover has a good program because when I was teaching at Ohio University, when I left the Montreal Symphony, I recruited at the Dover schools often, quite often. And
I think it still continues.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful program. And and you went to school then in terms of college and training, where did you go?
Well, I started at DePauw University in Indiana. They were going to have a music therapy program, which I had heard about, and they were going to start a program, so I went there. Also, it was a small school, which I wanted. And by my sophomore year, they decided, no, we're not going to start it. So I transferred to Michigan State, which had the first college music therapy program. And so I completed it there, did an internship in New Jersey. And then right after that, we were married. And that was another.
So you met Roy, and your husband, who was as we interviewed in another talk, who was our principal horn, and both of you were charter members, but you met him during your undergrad?
Right, at Michigan State. We were both playing in the Lansing Symphony one summer between my junior and senior years. And that was a wink, did it.
Wow, that's incredible. Was the wink during band or was the wink during orchestra?
Orchestra.
So at what point did you actually decide that you wanted to do music as a career?
Really, in high school. When I first heard about music therapy, I was fortunate my dad would take me on home visits. He was a physician. And he took me to some mental institutions when he had patients there. And I just saw some music programs with young children and adults at that time, which was back in the early 50s. And when I first saw those programs, it just hit that that's what I wanted to do. Even in high school, I had flute students for 50 cents a lesson. And but then when I really saw music in action, that helped me decide. Probably, I don't know, junior year in high school, I knew that was where I was headed. So that was the path I took.
Well, it doesn't surprise me then that you were such a passionate teacher in special education. And as I said, I can't think of a single student, all the ones I had over the years that took your classes, that raved about those programs.
Well, they had really wonderful experiences. Here they were able to teach in public schools, in special classes, in private, or not private, but homes for special people. And they just got a lot of different experiences in the schools, in the classroom. it was a great program that I inherited and hope passed on.
Well, you did. I'm curious, you know, you played principal flute with us for so many years, and you've played second flute with us, which I always say is some ways even more difficult because you have to be somebody else when you play. But you've also played piccolo, not only in particular parts that we have had in Ani, but you've also played in Northern Symphonic Winds and so many other groups. I'm curious, after all these years of playing different roles, what do you see the importance of each of those roles as a player when you sit as either principal or second or piccolo?
Well, principal is probably the most rewarding, it's the most challenging, and it's the most nerve-wracking. But I really enjoyed that when I had that opportunity. I really appreciated the opportunity, enjoyed it, and hopefully gave it my best. Second flute, the one thing that happened was I got to hear more of what else was going on in the orchestra. I was not so focused on, you know, the next solo coming up or the next difficult passage. So I got to hear the orchestra as a whole in a better way. And I had a wonderful experience of being second to Jill. She was just
Well, the two of you really were an amazing duo together. It was like a glove on a hand as far as I'm concerned. I'm curious, you know, we hear, maybe our listeners might find it interesting, many flutists don't like to go from piccolo to flute or flute to piccolo because they find it's difficult because it takes such different muscular workings to do this. How did you find having to go from flute to piccolo or piccolo to flute, let alone if you're playing principal?
I enjoyed playing piccolo somewhat, and particularly one piece. It was the piece that started me on the flute, and that was Stars and Stripes. Not that I was playing it, but when I first heard the piccolo players come out in front of the band, play Stars and Stripes, that's what really turned me on to playing the flute. And it was also my final piece with the orchestra. You may not remember that, but in the summer concert in Watertown. So I didn't start playing it, but it was what turned me on to flute, and it was my swan song. But switching back and forth from the two instruments, I didn't do it enough. The little bit I did on piccolo, I didn't find it to be a problem. It was challenging, but I was able to do it and enjoyed doing it, but preferred the flute.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you played that solo in Stars and Stripes. We did it every summer. That was the last piece we would play for our summer Pops concerts, both here at Watertown or wherever we would play in northern New York. And it was always a consummate performance. And I think because of your sure-handedness and that sense of it being a part of you, it really led the other piccolos. And every year you would stand up from memory and do this. And I think that's one reason it was always so stellar, was because you had it was such a part of your soul at that point that you just did it. You know, when you were teaching at Crane and had a lot of classes, and for a while at Crane, I know you played in the woodwind quintet, you played in the faculty quintet, but you played in so many different chamber ensembles, and you had these classes. Plus you played in Ani, Northern Symphonic Winds, so many different ensembles. How did you find, by the way, I asked Roy the same question when he was interviewing, and how did you find it to balance this with and practicing as well with your family?
It was always a balancing act of trying to have time for each thing, my teaching, my family, my practicing, playing in rehearsals, concerts, whatever. It was always a juggling act, and somehow it worked out, but it was always a bit of a struggle. If I was with the kids, I think I should be practicing, or if I'm practicing, I really should be getting dinner ready. It was just always this battle with myself, but it worked out. I enjoyed everything I was doing. A wonderful family. I enjoyed, always enjoyed being in any rehearsal, just whatever it was, but especially Ani, it was just a thrill.
Wow. And I always could tell that because you always came, first thing, you came so well prepared for every rehearsal. And secondly, I could always tell it wasn't that you really loved what you were doing. And I'm sure you wouldn't have been doing it if you didn't, because you had so many other things going in your life. And as I mentioned with Roy when he was with us before, you had two such wonderful kids, and both musicians, both violinists. And
Where
how many
that-
grandchildren do you have now?
We have 7.
Oh, my goodness.
And the youngest one is a sophomore in high school, and the oldest is a nurse in St. Louis. And none of them went on in music, although one stayed with the cello and is a wonderful cellist. But they all found other interests, but it was part of most of their lives, growing up with music and playing instruments, and then they found other channels.
Other things to do. But music is such a great teacher for other things about life. It's not just about being in that. It's such a great trainer. I'm curious, after all these years, I've said this to every musician, that I apologize almost for asking, but are there particular composers or pieces that you have enjoyed the most? I know you enjoy everything you play, but I'm just curious. Have there been?
Yeah, I think almost from when I first heard classical and romantic music, I sort of got stuck there, and those are my favorite eras. And sort of the big 2 or 3 would be Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms. Anytime we did those symphonies in the orchestra, or other pieces by them, but it was just always a thrill.
They never get old.
No,
do
they don't. They just stay with you, and each time it's a new...
It's a new experience,
right.
And they get fresher all the time. And I'm just curious, are there any particular concerts or pieces that you remember from, I know it's a lot of years, 30 years of playing, but anything that strikes you at all?
Oh, that's a hard question, because I really did enjoy most everything we did. But one of the experiences that I really enjoyed, and it was very emotional, was when we did the, can't remember the exact name, the salute to the armed forces or something like
Veterans
that.
Salute.
Or Veterans Salute.
Yes.
When that first time they stood up in the audience, that was just sort of a really emotional experience. And it's still, even the last time I did it was, but that first time just blew me away.
Isn't it amazing that we've played that every summer, and every time we play it, I have a hard time seeing the score because I have so many tears in my eyes. Every summer. It never gets old. And to turn around and see these amazing people who serve this country stand up and and be applauded by their fellow citizens.
Right.
It is just, I get goosebumps thinking about it, you know. But that's, thank you for mentioning that as a memory, because that is one of my best memories, really, is every summer. And people have asked me, do you get tired of this? I said, no. And I said, and the orchestra doesn't get tired of it.
It's always a highlight.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to thank you for all the years and the love that you gave this orchestra.
Well.
And also all the students that you worked with that went through Crane. And just being a part of everybody's life, both you and Roy have made such a difference in the fabric of music in this community and in this region. And
Thank you so much, and it was a highlight of our lives.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank our listeners for being with us today for Tuesday Talks with the Maestro. Please check in with us next week, and we'll have another special guest for you. And until then, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.